The European Central Bank has announced the creation of the digital euro and the features that this new currency will have, raising many questions about the future of privacy and leaving the door open to the end of cash and an increase in control that governments will be able to have on its citizens, and the most drastic change to the monetary system since the end of the gold standard. The history of money is marked by a constant in which the means used for exchange have always been initially adopted by people freely and then become controlled by kingdoms, empires, and governments. It happened with metals, which began to be minted by kings and emperors, then with gold certificates as the first form of paper money, until central banks became the only ones authorized to issue them, initially backed in gold and later issued at will in what is known as fiat money. And now, taking some of the characteristics of cryptocurrencies, governments have begun to implement central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. This medium of exchange, inspired in part by Bitcoin, seeks to create a digital version of cash, taking aspects of cryptocurrencies such as the ease and speed to carry out transactions and uniting them with the positive of fiat currencies, which is their relative stability to make payments, but leaving aside what is perhaps the main characteristic of Bitcoin: its decentralization and the lack of control over the system. And it is precisely here where the concerns of some people with the adoption of this new currency arise, starting with the privacy that would be lost. Something that the president of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde, recognizes as a problem and affirms that 43% of the people surveyed who were familiar with this project mentioned privacy as one of their main concerns with the digital euro.
We seek to ensure high standards of privacy for digital euro users, but full anonymity, such as offered by cash, does not appear a viable option, in my opinion. It would contravene other public policy objectives, such as ensuring compliance with anti-money laundering rules and combating the financing of terrorism. And it would also make it virtually impossible to limit the use of the digital euro as a form of investment, for example via holding limits, for which identities of users need to be known. We should at least provide a level of privacy equal to that of current electronic payment solutions.
The new currency will not have the anonymity of cash, but a level of privacy similar to that of electronic transactions. These transactions would go from being known to several of the financial intermediaries involved to also being directly known to the government. The reason, like many reasons given by governments, is that they are intended to protect people by preventing this currency from being used for illegal purposes or that could have an impact on the safety and well-being of people. This would not be a problem if the use of this currency was optional, but what if the Europeans do not want to use it?
Although an acceptance obligation has to be weighed against principles such as contractual freedom and competition, we should bear in mind that it is a constitutional feature of cash as central bank money to be legal tender. And it would be unprecedented to issue central bank money for retail payments without legal tender status, just because it circulates electronically. Moreover, a positive side effect of a legal tender status may be that it facilitates network effects, allowing citizens to have the option to pay anywhere and easily access the digital euro. Indeed, the digital euro can only act as a monetary anchor if it becomes a convenient digital medium of exchange that is part of the everyday lives of Europeans.
Although Lagarde is very diplomatic about it, she makes it clear that this currency, being the official currency of the European Central Bank, would end up being as mandatory as the euro is at the moment. In any case, we have indications that there would be no need to directly force the adoption of the digital euro, since some of the cryptocurrencies that move the highest volume of transactions on a daily basis are precisely the cryptocurrencies that follow the behavior of fiat money. In fact, the cryptocurrency that moves the most daily volume on exchanges is not Bitcoin, but Tether, which follows the behavior of the US dollar. And it moves that volume despite constant warnings about the risks of not being able to sustain its dollar value and the high chances of suffering the same fate as other such cryptocurrencies. But if you wanted to force people to use it, it would only be a matter of prohibiting some cash payments and stop creating bills and coins, causing the eventual disappearance of physical money.
People are increasingly paying digitally instead of using cash. Almost half of euro area consumers say that they prefer to pay with cashless means of payment, such as cards. We will continue to provide cash. But if it is used less and less for payments, public money could ultimately lose its role as the monetary anchor for the hybrid model, threatening its key function in securing trust in payments, with implications for the economy. Payments are a public good that is simply too important to be left to the market only.
All this generates concern because it leaves the door open to a large number of scenarios that could be extremely worrying. First, because of the loss of privacy due to the possibility that the central bank will now know at all times exactly how much money Europeans have and how they use it. Second, because of control. If the central bank decides, it can deactivate the use of the virtual wallet or place where these digital euros are stored. Currently, when someone has committed crimes, most governments can freeze their accounts, but with this digital currency, the possibility of controlling the gasoline that can be bought monthly would be opened, alluding to environmental concerns, or the amount of junk food that can be purchased, alluding to people's health, among many other possibilities. And third, because of the effects that monetary policies could have. In the event of a crisis, the central bank could implement excessively expansionary policies with negative interest rates that force people to consume and invest their savings to avoid losing them, because negative interest rates mean that their savings decrease over time. Currently, implementing very negative rates would cause people to transfer their saved money from the bank to cash to avoid being affected, but in this case it would be very easy for the central bank to implement this monetary policy and apply these negative rates on the wallets in which the digital euros are stored. And all these possibilities would only be the tip of the iceberg and extensions of things that are already real in some way, with taxes that are used to discourage some behaviors, as well as regulations and other types of policies. But what would happen if, for example, an authoritarian regime takes over that blocks the use of money by people who protest or criticize it? And although some may think that it is nothing serious because they are outside the Eurozone, the reality is that although this video has focused on the digital euro, practically all the central banks in the world have begun to develop projects to create their own CBDCs, with China's being one of the most advanced, which is wonderful because China has never used excessive control over its citizens. And it is a matter of time before people start using these means of exchange, voluntarily at the beginning, for practicality later on, and finally out of obligation. More efficient, but less private and with more government control. After all, we are almost at 2030. And you, do you share a negative view of this currency with me? Do you think that everything will remain the same and nothing will change, or it will even be something positive? I would like to know your opinion. See you next time.